Good morning. It is Monday morning of the last week before we go home for winter break. And if you saw the last video, you know that I had a sub for the second half of the day on Friday. I went home mostly because I lost my voice and my throat was getting a little scratchy. Energetically, I never felt terrible, and you could still hear a little bit in my voice, but I feel fine. So here we are, ready to go. So this week, the first 2 days of the week, we're going to be back in our book work. We're going to try to get to a really good point, kind of a good stopping point to pick up again after the break. On Wednesday, I have a special activity for my students. That's when we're going to be doing our friction fire workshop over about 2 hours in the middle of the day on a part of the property here on campus with the guidance of our outdoor specialist, our district outdoor specialist. And then Thursday and Friday, I have just kind of loose plans for some word games and some more improv games and things that are a little bit looser. Probably like so many districts, our attendance can be pretty variable those last 2 days before break. So you want to make it really worthwhile for the kids who are here. You want to end strong for the kids whose attendance is 100% for the week, but also acknowledge that the energy in the building and their mindset is going to be different the last 2 days, and you want to be swimming with that current instead of against it. So that's a kind of an overview for the week ahead. This weekend, I did quite a bit of reading. Because I got home early on Friday, but I still had a little bit of energy. I got some of my weekend chores done a bit early. And then I didn't take part in my family's activities this weekend just because I knew I was incubating something that I was not trying to share with my community at large. So I stayed home. I did a bunch of reading, and I read a paper, like a white paper, I guess. And one of the authors is Timothy Odengard, who writes a lot on structured literacy. And what he was trying to do with this paper, along with two other co-authors who, I think one of their last name was Lyon, Lyon, and then the other Gierka, but I don't know them, and so I don't know if I'm remembering their names exactly right. What they were trying to do with this paper was disambiguate structured literacy as an approach from science of reading as an ideology, and almost one of those words that has come to have a lot of connotations as a term referring to a kind of shifting set of practices, but definitely at this point an ideology. And I really appreciate it when scholars and philosophers and authors and cultural critics do that work of kind of pulling apart the discourse so that we're, as a culture, a little bit clearer on what we mean when we use terms that are floating around meaning different things to different people, and just naming that and then trying to figure out what parts can be actually fixed down. And of course with language, that's a tricky thing to try and do. But what he did, what the three of the authors did in this paper, is list kind of what structured literacy is and what it is not. And it really got me thinking about the elements that I bring into the classroom. And in these videos, I've referred to those as like extensions or enhancements or leaping off points from the curriculum itself. And I do that intuitively, but I never thought to do that in a way that was almost quantifiable. But after reading that paper, I went through the elements in the curriculum itself and saw that about 15 to 20% of the time spent strictly in the curricular lesson from the books, about 15 to 20% is word work, like direct instruction word work, whether that be morphology or phonemic awareness or very, very lightly vocab. The curriculum does vocab very, very lightly, and definitely insufficiently, but it does touch on that. So about 15 to 20% is word work. About 40% is reading practice, although the way the curriculum is set up, only about 3 minutes of a 50-minute period. So of that 40% that is reading practice, only a very little bit is an individual child reading, because we rotate the reading passages around the group. So, and then about, what are we at? 60, 40. So about, no, 40, about 40% is in their workbook, which is a little bit of writing. It's a little bit of reading comprehension. It's quite a bit of reading comprehension strategies, and then a little bit of word work at the end, but that they do independently in the workbook. So that kind of touches on some of the other percentages, but it's the only writing component. So having looked at that, I understood a little bit more why intuitively I tend to pull out a lot more vocab work and a lot more writing work, a little bit more morphology and phonics work, but in the program, I think that's the part that's done the best in the framework of structured literacy. Anyway, all of this is to say that it made me think a little bit differently about how I structure the classroom and want to at least articulate that to myself, and then talk to other folks in my building and maybe in my district about how we can just do that better as a district, how we can take what the curriculum does percentage-wise and then draw out the other things that from a structured literacy framework we want the kids to be able to do, and so we need to give them opportunity to do that. So it was a really fruitful weekend for me that way. That's kind of one of my favorite things to do, is have some open space to read something really good and thought-provoking, and then to just follow those threads to kind of a new understanding or an insight or an experimentation, a new practice, something like that. So that was good. That was a good thing for me to do this weekend. So I'm ready to go now for the week ahead. Some of my students did have their second sub on Friday, and when they get 2 good sub notes in a row, I usually bake something for them. Not usually, I'm pretty consistent about it because they know that's the deal. So I probably will be baking tonight because, as I said, on Friday, they would have had their second sub. So I think 2 or 3 of my classes I will bake for them. But I'm gonna have a sub again tomorrow, so I'll bake Tuesday for them for Wednesday. This is gonna get a little bit complicated. It's always like this the last week before a break. You try to squeeze in so much stuff, some of it fun, some of it have to, and that's the way it is. Okay, this video is probably getting pretty long, so I'm gonna sign off here and I'll see y'all tomorrow.